Hey guys, today we're going to go over how to start TIG welding. So on the previous section of video we discussed our setup, the different parts of the welder, what everything does, the different parts of the torch, what kind of gas we're using, etc. So now we're going to get into welding our first coupon. So I've got two pieces of 1/4 inch plate right here, and I had mentioned this before, but it's very important that you understand that this color of the steel right now is a dark gray, and what you're seeing is mill scale. So when this comes out of a furnace, we'll pour this into bar shape and roll it out. It oxidizes and it makes this protective layer over it, and that's why it doesn't immediately rust. But to burn through this layer, you need to get it to about 3,000 degrees. And steel melts at like 1,800. Whatever the difference is, it's a big difference. So if you physically prep this wherever you're going to weld, it's going to make it easier to weld. And I can't state this enough, but when you're TIG welding, it likes clean metal. Stick welding doesn't really care as much. TIG welding does. So we're going to go over just laying some beads, and then we'll do a simple fillet in the 2F position, and then we're going to go over aluminum, and aluminum is a different beast altogether. So I don't want to grind this aluminum with a grinding wheel because it will gum the wheel up, but I do want to physically prep it, and then I want to chemically prep it. So the same thing, it's got oxide or oxidation on it. Aluminum will oxidate really quickly just sitting exposed, and when you're trying to weld through that, it's really difficult. And even after we prep it, I'll run a pass with no filler, and you'll see how the alternating current, the AC, will clean the metal every other cycle. So that's 60 times a second, and 30 of those every second is on the cleaning phase. All right, so first thing we'll do is we'll get this set up. Make sure you've got safety glasses and a face mask on. So right now there's a flap disc on this. I don't want to use that because it's just too expensive. So I'm going to use a hard disc. All right.
Many days later.
So as you can see, I've knocked that mill scale off. That's probably good enough if you're really worried about penetration. Through with a clean flat disc.
Many grindings later.
And so what I've done is, see that just kind of polishes it or smooths it out. And then I'm going to do this other piece.
Grinding, 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 meow, 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 grinding.
So my only intention on this piece is to use it as the upper part of a fillet. So you see I clean the what we call the HAZ, the heat affected zone. I've just cleaned up about 1 inch, right? And I did it on all sides. And then you can feel a kind of sharp edge here from where I sheared this and the hydraulic shear. I want to get rid of that so that when I set this perpendicular on the other plate, it's very flat and it makes it easier for me to get full penetration. So and then what we're looking at is I'm going to run a couple of passes on here just to show you, and then I'll run a fillet like this, and then we'll go over to the TIG welding area and I'll show you how I prep the aluminum. So since I'm welding steel, I don't want to use aluminum or stainless rod. I need to be able to identify what rod I'm using. And here's some scrap, but this is ER
70S.
It's the same wire that we use on the MIG welder. It's just like in a thicker form, almost like a round bar form. Got my long sleeves on, I'll get my welding jacket. I've got my hood, and I've got my TIG welding gloves. It's very important, like we said earlier, that you're using those gloves so that you can feel the wire in your hand. And before I forget, as you're feeding that wire, remember you don't want to just push the wire in, because your hand's going to get close to the heat and it's going to start burning the ends of those gloves. So don't do that. All right, so we're in my office. I want to show you a couple things. Right here, TIG collets backing caps. All right, so here's a torch assembly. We've got a whole bunch of TIG collet bodies. I was looking for those. I've got short backing caps, long backing caps, insulator cups, stuff like that, and then the TIG collets, right? So hard to see, but that is a 3/32. All right, it says so right here. And that would have to go with a 3/32 body. And I'm gonna be real honest with you, I can't read what that says. Oh, but I can look at that end and know that it's not the right size. Oh, so that's a 16th, right? So that collet won't work unless you have the right kind. So we'll put this back. We got tungsten here, and we talked about this. Pretty much all I have is 2% serrated. You can see sometimes it's orange, sometimes it's gray, sometimes it's even purple. We never grind that end down. We always grind the blank end. And then if you want to know what size it is, 3/32. You can see that's pretty thin. And then we've got 1/8 right here. It's pretty thick. And then somewhere in here, I've got some 16th, which is really small. So if I'm going to weld, something really thick like 3/8 or 1/2 inch, then I'm going to use something larger like this 1/8 inch. I'll have to change the cup, the collet, and the collet body to do that. Normally, for everything we do, I'm using 3/32. I feel comfortable welding 1/4 inch with 3/32. If I'm welding aluminum or really thin sheet metal, then I'll probably drop down to a 16th. Same thing. Here we go. Piece of 16th down in there. Can see how small it is. If I'm welding thin aluminum, I'm going to drop down to a 16th also. But for what we're doing, 3/32. Here's the cups. I wish I could tell you I understood how the cup sizes work. I don't, but I'm pretty sure this 47. See, it says 10N46, 10N47. The 47 is, nope, that's not it. Maybe it is 46, yeah, because it says number 8, all right? So that's the one that we use on almost all of them. But depending on what size collet you're using, these are not completely interchangeable. And then you can see I've got some really wide ones right here, et cetera, et cetera. But mostly you're looking for the one that says number 8. And remember, these are ceramic, so they'll take a lot of heat, but they're very fragile. So different ones for different operations. Okay, so that's where those parts are. There's a lot of stuff in here, so. But down in here, there's more TIG stuff, cups, tungsten, insulators, backing plates, etc. All right, so you don't need me to figure that out. Now, in here in the closet, I've got this rack. I try to put everything kind of logically. So that says 308, 3/32. That 308, this is going to be all stainless rod. All right, so don't mess with that. Right here, this says ER70S2. All right, so you can use that for steel, and it is 3/32. And then in here, it says stainless. All right, so it's probably like a 403 or something like that. It doesn't matter because you're probably not going to be doing stainless right now anyways. So if we go here, this is going to be basically where you want to grab from. And you can look, it's hard to see, but it will tell you if it's ER70S6 right there. Oh, in fact, it's all ER70S2. So that's fine, just use that. And the 3/32 is the one that we're going to use the most. Now, over here, you start getting into aluminum, and it's hard to tell the difference between aluminum and stainless, so you're going to have to be real careful. And I don't know if you can see it, the color difference, but the stainless is a little darker, and it's almost more dull than the aluminum. And I've done that where I've made the mistake of trying to use stainless wire on aluminum or vice versa. Does not work. So all of this is wire. I keep a lot of aluminum in here if you're welding aluminum. Please just make sure it's not something I need and try not to waste it. We'll get back into the aluminum later. But I'm going to take a couple pieces of this, and I'm going to take a couple pieces of aluminum. I think one piece will be fine. Again, spend a little time and get prepped. I've got my hood, I've got a jacket, I've got my gloves, I've got my rods, gas is full. Need to make sure that the ground is actually attached here. So let's get set up. Make sure this ground is attached. We talked about this in the video earlier, but make sure it's closer to the machine than you are. You don't want to get between the ground and that. Since we're welding steel, I'm going to have to change this. You can see that tip is a little bit rounded because I was welding aluminum. So I'll loosen that backing cap, make sure this isn't hot. Take the tungsten out. I'm going to go sharpen this. Now, ideally, especially in a shop setting, no other metal or anything would touch that grinder because it will deposit, little microscopic pieces of steel or aluminum or whatever into this tungsten where the grooves are. Here we'll just have to deal with it. But also I want you to see that cone. That cone is a little short, to be honest, now that I'm looking at it. So I think I'm going to make that cone a little more elongated, where the angle is more peaked instead of... Now this is really what I'm looking for, especially for steel. So you can see how the cone is longer and it's a sharper angle, right? Set this back up. I'm going to have about 1/4 inch stick out. All right, that's tight. My gas is on. Welding hood. Make sure that shade is set dark enough for TIG welding. Initially, I don't want you to worry about using a rod. What I want you to do is just to drag the torch. Remember, nothing touches the tungsten. All right, so if the welder is off, that's fine. But when you're welding, you cannot touch the tungsten to the steel or the base metal, and you cannot touch the filler rod to the tungsten. So what happens if you do that is it's so hot it will suck the material, either the filler rod or the parent metal, onto there, and then you're not going to be able to have a hot enough arc to really penetrate the way that you want to. So again, this is your foot pedal. It's just like a gas pedal on a car. The more you press it, the more amperage or heat, I guess you could say, you're going to get. And what I want to try to do now is set this up where you can watch what's going on. So you can see, you can hold it however you're comfortable. This is normally how I hold it. I've got a 10-degree travel angle. I'm straight up and down on the work angle. You can see how close I am, maybe 1/8 of an inch, and I'm just gonna drag. All right, so if you're more comfortable pushing, you can push, but right now all I want you to do is make nice, straight little lines, no filler rod. Gotta set this up somehow. All right, well, wish me luck. All right, machine's on. We're welding steel. It's gonna be set to DC negative. I'm at 120 for my settings, and my post flow is 0. So I've got it set right here, and I know you can't see it yet. I'm gonna press the pedal. Here we go, cover. Okay, now, first thing I noticed is it left a little pit and it did that brown spot. So let's figure out what's going on with that. All right, I've got gas, so we're good. There we go. Just nice and slow, very steady, and I'm just dragging. And I'm actually maxed out on the pedal right now. All right, so you can see what we've got going right there. All right, cover. Now, as I'm doing this, I'm putting more and more heat into this plate, and so my puddle is going to be easier to control, and I might even have to move a little bit faster. So you can see the little freeze lines where the metal is cooling. Hopefully you can see that. I want you to do a whole coupon of this before you try dipping, okay? So let's see if we can do another angle. All right, cover. Now you can see the puddle. I'm kind of dragging it around in a circle, and then as I drag, that puddle's just following me, and that puddle is the only thing I'm really concerned about, because that's going to tell me when to dip the rod. All right, so if I start going down, the puddle will follow me, and then if I start pushing it, the puddle will follow me. And then back up. All right. So I want you to experiment. I want you to play around. Don't just do, do a whole bunch of straight lines, but then try, going down, try going up, try going backwards, try pushing, try pulling, because we've already got two things going on: our foot control, and then just our keeping this torch nice and steady. Right. Once you do a whole coupon like this, really nice straight lines, especially if you do like the snake going in and in and in and in on itself, then I'm going to have you go to using the filler rod. Okay, so whatever you're comfortable with, I do it a little different. I use my pinky and technically ring finger, and then my index and thumb. Some people do it just with their index and then between their middle finger. Like I said earlier, I want you to practice, be able to do this with both hands. If you're sitting here in class doing nothing, or you can't TIG weld because somebody's using the welder, just practice. You can't get enough of this practice. So again, I want you to understand that I don't want my hand just to continually push down and get closer because I'm going to burn the glove. My hand should be 4 inches away, and then I should just be feeding that. And that is where the difficulty lies in learning TIG. I've got my torch, I strike the arc, I'm going to watch the puddle, and then when I see that puddle, I'm just going to dip, right? And just dun, 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 dun. What's very important to understand is that if you go dip, pull out, dip, pull out, dip, pull out, the rod isn't staying preheated, and then there's a jet of gas coming out. So every time you pull out, it's cooling down, by a couple hundred degrees, and it's oxidizing around this. And so when you go back in, we're going back to the mill scale fight. We're fighting that. So what you're looking for is to keep this filler rod in the jet stream or the air stream of our shielding gas, right? But you don't want it so close that it's just melting off, and you don't want to hit the tungsten, and you don't want it to stick in the metal. Eventually you're looking for a sweet spot, so you're going to find that when you first start, you're going to feel the dip. You're going to feel this kind of hit and then release, hit and release, hit and release. Eventually, what you're aiming for is that it kind of just drips right off the end. It's just, you're in that sweet spot. You've got a good rhythm going as far as the amount of heat and the travel speed, where this is just kind of melting in place, and you won't feel that, I'm exaggerating right here, but you won't feel that tick, 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 right? It should really feel like nothing. So you're just moving that with your hand the whole time. All right, cover. Okay, so there's my puddle, and I'm moving, and then I'm just gonna go bloop, boop. And you can, I don't know if you can hear it in the video, but you can hear it. It kind of makes like a ticking sound. And notice I'm trying to keep it in the stream. And I apologize, it's hard to do this and talk. Alright, so there's what we're looking at. You can see that it's actually raised up because you're adding a filler material now. And so we're going to do that one more time. The other thing is, especially on a job, whatever end of the rod you start with, don't burn the other end off, because you can't prove what kind of rod you're using once you do that. So weld inspector will bust your butt for that. Cover. So what's happening is, I'm depositing the filler metal, the rod, and I'm getting enough heat that I'm penetrating, and it's sinking into the base metal and blending with it. So it is on top, it's raising it, but a good portion of it is going into the metal itself. Nice and slow, nice and steady. It's not about how fast you are, it's about how smooth you are. And you can see there's a lot of heat getting in here. So earlier we talked about the heat affected zone. You can see that blue spilling out in each direction, and that is your heat affected zone. And so the other thing is when you're welding, as you start coming near an edge, any edge, the heat doesn't have as much area, surface area to escape, so you're going to have to weld faster. So if you're welding down on this edge, you know, the heat can go that way, but it can't go this way, so it's going to make the metal, the base metal, hotter, and it's going to be more likely to melt. But to compensate for that, you'll have to move faster or use less heat, less amperage. Okay, so we've got that, and let's look at doing a fillet. Right. So the first thing is I'm going to get something to hold this in place how I want it. I'm going to tack weld this cover, and you can actually tack weld this with no filler material. I'm just melting one to the other. So you can see that, and now that's tack welded. I don't want it to pull up on this side from the heat, so you might want to tap that down, and I'll add another tack cover. And I want you to notice, you know, that tack, that was about 2 to 3 seconds. Oh, again, right. don't get in a race. Okay, nice flat edge. And what we're going to do now is try to run a fillet on this. All right, cover. So I'm starting at the top, and then I'm going down and back up, down, back up, and I'm adding my filler rod. I'm going nice and slow because I want this to have 100% penetration. And the other thing is you're going to want to watch your angle, because if you're not depositing the filler rod correctly, you're going to get undercut, and that's going to fail the weld. And I'll be honest, you can just straight drag it if you get a feeling for it. I'm going to back out of that. And notice when I came out of that arc, I let it off softly. So there we go. I've got a wire brush. I'm just going to clean that up so you can see what we're looking at. But you notice that that's 45 degrees, right? So these two pieces are at 90. I've split both of them. I don't have any undercut, and the size of my weld is about 1/4 inch to 3/8 from toe to toe diagonally. So that's exactly what I'm looking for. Cover. All right, so I'm starting ahead and I'm moving back and getting that weld that I already did hot. I'm going to go back over and try to melt it in so that I'm tying the two welds in, and ideally it's not going to be really obvious where I did that. I'm not going to change the shape or the size of the weld. I don't want a crater and I don't want a mountain, because that's going to mean that there's some kind of difference in penetration right there. And it's very important that you can tie in correctly, because you're not going to weld everything in one pass. You know, maybe you need to move, or maybe you run out of filler rod. So practicing that tie-in is really very important. And again, I'm letting the puddle tell me when to dip. So I'm going down, then I go up, and it's got a big fat puddle, so I add some, and I'll drag that puddle down, go back up, and I'm making sure that wherever I'm undercutting on the top, I'm filling it in, and I'll slowly let out. All right, so you can see how much we did there, and you can see, you know, I'm not even quite sure where my tie-in was. It might be right there where there's just a little bit of peak, but I think that would be fine to pass an inspection. All right, so I'm going to stop there with that. You can watch this 500 times.
Hey guys, my battery died, so I apologize. I appreciate you watching. On the next video, I'll go into welding aluminum, so that will probably work out better anyways. Hopefully you enjoyed the video, and make sure you watch it a couple times so you can really understand those key techniques. All right, appreciate it.